have been meaning to record this video for 9 days now, at least. Here we are now. I'm going to share with you all of the books that I read last month. There are 6 of them, but one is a chapter book that I read with my 5.5-year-old Henry. I had so much fun with this video last month doing my roundup of books because so many of you really watched and listened to what I said and gave me recommendations based on like your understanding of what I liked to read, and oh my gosh, I benefited so much. So I really hope that you got something for your reading list from that video, and I hope that you'll get something for your reading list from this one. I have some really fun, very different types of recommendations. So here we go. The first book that I read this past month was A Prayer for the Crown Shy, which is the second book in the Monk and Robot series by Becky Chambers. And last month I told you that the first book in that series was my favorite read of the month, and I'm going to tell you that the second book in the series was my favorite thing that I read this month. So that just has a special place in my heart. I am just loving the characters of Sibling Dex and Moscap the robot. Like, I just love them, and it's just like very thought-provoking story, and also the world is just sort of whimsical and feels like a positive look at what the future could be like, so that's really nice. Yeah, so I highly recommend the Monk and Robot series by Becky Chambers if you haven't gotten into that yet, and I can say that the second book is just as good as the first. Moving on, the next book that I read last month was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, and it was good. It was kind of depressing. It's just kind of sad. There's like a disability, and it is just like this, it's just kind of sad, and like disabilities can be kind of sad. If you grew up in the 90s and you have ever played a video game, I think you would enjoy this. Like, it was very relatable and well written, like a good story, but not like the most upbeat read. And I think you might find as I continue talking about books that I like happy endings, and I like things with a little bit more of a positive outlook on things. So next I read 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. I read this book the week of Valentine's Day, and that ended up being perfect because it is a love story. I think it's good. I think like the characters are very dynamic and interesting, and I felt like I was kind of dipping my toe into this African-American literature culture that I'm not typically reading, so that was interesting. And yeah, I would recommend it. It would be a great like summer beach read, or if you're looking for something light to read during like spring break, 7 Days in June I think would be excellent. Last month I also read The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. It is about a set of twins, 2 girls who grow up in this very rural community. They're mixed race, and they go on to lead separate lives. One chooses to pass as white and one does not, and so it's like really fascinating to see what that looks like for those people. And it's like, it's cool, it's a cool idea to kind of see like how essentially like the same person could be perceived with different life choices and how they present themselves. I did have kind of a weird feeling. There was like this trans character that was not a main character, but felt kind of like forced. It just felt like this weird didactic trans thing that was a little bit disjointed from the story, because it was fascinating to be looking at race in this way, and then it just felt like tacking on another issue that the story wasn't really designed to tell. And I wonder almost if publishers are sort of suggesting this or requiring this, that there are trans characters in stories now, because like, yes, that's the current thing. And that's great to have trans people represented in literature, but if it's not part of this particular story, I just don't see why it needs to be like shoved in there in that way. It just felt awkward. Anyway, yeah, that was The Vanishing Half. Would I recommend it? Kind of no. It was kind of meh for me. This next book that I read was a recommendation from my friend Amanda. Thank you, Amanda. And it was called Homegoing by, I'm not going to pronounce this right, but I think it's Gashi. Gasi? Ooh, it'll be on the screen. Sorry. Um, this was really interesting. It gave a perspective of slavery and race that goes way back before those people are brought to the United States. So I think so often the racism and slavery story is told from the moment that slaves arrive, or perhaps the ship is mentioned, and it just dives into all the atrocities of slavery and what plantation life was like and all of that. But this brought everything back to the Gold Coast and these families and the tribes that they're living in and what that was like and who these people really were, and gave you like this really broad timeline of all the way back to that and then into the future of those people's generations in the United States beyond slavery even. So that was really cool. I liked like the huge timeline. I loved having all the different characters, but still they felt very tied together because they were descendants of each other. That was really fun. It came together really beautifully at the end, and I would definitely recommend Homegoing, especially if you're interested in reading something about race or slavery or racism. Yeah, it's a good topic to just kind of sprinkle in your reading every once in a while. And so Homegoing, I would recommend way more over The Vanishing Half from that perspective too. So then the last book I'm going to talk about is actually a book I read with my 5.5-year-old Henry. We oftentimes choose longer chapter books to read together. And we will get the audiobook version, and also I will read aloud from the book. And let me go grab it because I actually chose to buy the illustrated version of this book so that there were also pictures, because he's 5 and pictures are fun. So this is the illustrated version of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the first book in the series. I talked about this a little bit on my Instagram if you follow me there. And it's just, the illustrations are so fun. I'm really glad that we went ahead and got this, even though we were listening to the audiobook a lot of the time. It was just fun to get to flip through and find the pictures from the section we had listened to, or even like as we're listening, flip around and see what section we were at. It's actually funny, the reason that we started reading this was that a kid in his class was calling him Harry Potter, and he didn't know who Harry Potter was. And we said, hey, maybe we should read the book, because actually Harry Potter can do magic and he's really cool. And even though it's not nice for that kid to call you something you don't want to be called, it might help to understand what he's calling you. And so, yeah, a weird reason to read a book, but we picked it up and he became obsessed. He loves it. He cannot wait to read more. He rides his little broom around and calls it his Nimbus 2000, and he really wants to do potions. And yeah, so I wasn't sure if he would be an appropriate age to read this at 5.5, almost 6. I was probably 8-ish when I read it. But yeah, he loved it. I think it was fine. We are going to hold off on reading the next few and just sort of like take our time with it, because the characters do age and they're already much older than he is. So we're just reading some other chapter book series, and we'll come back to the next book in a little while so that we can sort of slowly get through them. Also, I was not one of those kids who was obsessed with Harry Potter as a kid. I read the first few and then kind of moved on. And I'm just not really interested in having a Harry Potter obsession in my house now. So selfishly, I'm saying, nah, we're gonna read something else for a little while. But yeah, I think if he were reading it himself, he could totally binge Harry Potter. That would be fine with me. But since I'm having to go through it with him, we're going to read something that we're both going to enjoy. And yeah, we'll come back to it in a bit. And we'll keep buying the illustrated copies because that was really fun. That's everything, and I'll see you guys next time.